Good afternoon. I'm Leandro Ventroni. Today is August 28th at 3 o'clock. I welcome you to this plenary meeting, Silvopastoral Systems Profitability, Beef, Timber, and Positive Carbon. In this 28th Aapresid Congress, Forever Alive, Forever Green. At the right of the screen, you have a sections to enter your questions, and when the presentation is over, I'll pass the questions over to the speakers. You can ask the questions as the presentation proceeds. In the top part of the website, you will find in the menu a tag entitled Participants. You will be able to meet the speakers and even arrange meetings with them. In the commercial hall, you can visit Aapresid space where you will watch videos with interviews to experts and other information. And to follow the Congress and the social media, remember to use your hashtag Congreso Aapresid. I will introduce the four speakers in this plenary. Martin Racines, he's an agronomist, he's forestry and livestock manager of CENI, and he's member of the Argentine Forest Association. Jorge Esquivel is an agronomist. He specializes in economic affairs of agricultural companies. He's members of ACREA, private consultant and farmer. Javier Yenge, he has a PhD in biology. He is a researcher in CONICET. He works in the Agency of Rural Extension in Tandil. His research focuses on ecology, ecophysiology, and ecohydrology, both in forestation and native forest, uh, as well as in pure forestry systems around the country. Ana Lupe is a forestry engineer. She has a master in soil science. Since 2015, he is the coordinator of the INTA project on forestry or silviculture in forest. She also works for the Congreso. She develops research on fertility and forest soil management and sustainable soil management in planted forest. Martin Racine will open this set of presentation. Remember to send your questions. Thank you. I'm Martin Racines. I'm a forest and livestock manager of CENI and Company. I will share with you our experience in silvopastoral systems. I will share the screen. Just a minute, please. I first want to introduce our company. The company was founded in August the 1st, 1940 by Mr. Enrique Seni. We celebrated our 80th anniversary this year. Don Enrique started to trade his sunflower and linseed products or flax products. Then the company continued to grow in cattle, livestock, forestry industry, and in the past few years in the capital market. We could talk about silvopastoral systems in Corrientes province in the southwest in the ski department. In the Esquina, in the department of Esquina. Of the 630 employees, 530 work inland, and more than 500 worked in the INTA. This is due to the industrial activity that requires labor, and because livestock and forestry systems are located around this area. In 2003, we faced a dilemma how would we grow the breeding herd? How would we increase productivity of livestock land? But we needed more forest lands because we had to uh, grow our timber production to supply the sawmills. We have to have this forest lands available. We have to avoid competition with the use of our own land. When um, charted the projection of soil use, we found that the forest system could grow only if the livestock system was reduced. So we had to think a lot. We conducted research and we went to the southern part of Misiones province where we met our colleagues. They had started in Tierra Colorada. Um, Already they have started silvopastoral systems here. Um, Grass grew so livestock could graze here, and trees also grew, and the uh, each system didn't bother the other one. And so we found lots of advantages and synergies in this activity, both for livestock and forestry. In the case of livestock, we saw that protection against frost and extreme heat was possible. We saw how the calorie stress um, was reduced in these animals because they were able to graze. Also, the dry matter production is higher, and the productivity of the productivity of non-desirable species reduced. Forestation reduced the fire risk because as cattle grazed, there was no residue, there was no remnant of dry grass. There was more presence of crop plots. The phosphorus content in the soil increased, and also the cash flow increased. Uh, in the past, we had lots of costs and expenses all the time, and we generated income only when we harvest. But mixing this with forestation and livestock grazing, we were able to improve the cash flow. Here we saw that livestock didn't was not reduced, and forestation could increase. This light blue areas are the shared hectares or the shared surface area by both systems. So we saw how these trees grew, and we also saw that grasses continue to grow even under the shade of the trees. We saw that people could ride the horses inside the forest. They get off the horse, and they were able to take measurements and report on those measurements. We saw how labor use increased for the same surface area. When we had only livestock systems, we needed 5 people working, and now with forestry, we need more people, 3 times more people. We see how we saw the change relationships with time. We see when the pine tree had a interesting value, we were able to expand livestock breeding, and when the calf had an interesting value, that was the moment to mm, plant more silvopastoral areas. And we also saw that this system had a higher return on investment. We were able to prove that our livestock grew very well. Also, our grass kept its productivity. In this picture, we see bright area, and we also see a consistent growth in our trees. In 2006, we started to consider livestock, and in publications as this one, published by the FAO, livestock was being questioned and was pointed as being one of the main causes of greenhouse gases. We were concerned about this because it was a threat to livestock and livestock sectors. We saw this as a virtuous circle, but we saw that people from other sides saw us this way as a depleting livestock system. So these were two different points of view. How we had to show that it was a 9 and not a 6. So we contacted some colleagues in Brazil who were developed a stamp called beef neutral carbon. The emissions. So this study related the emissions of livestock with carbon. And so we used this to add value to our production. I will leave this topic aside because Engineer Esquivel will refer to this. So I'll be glad to answer questions when presentations are completed. Thank you very much.
Muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Jorge Esquivel, soy ingeniero.
Jorge Esquivel, I am an agricultural engineer. I work in the northeast of Argentina. I'm really pleased and I feel privileged for being here today to share with you what we do on an everyday basis in our farms. I'm going to talk about silvopastoral system in a positive carbon balance. I will tell you what we have been doing for the last 20 years with the CREA people, INTA technicians, farmers, university researchers, so that we may get you interested in this very interesting issue that has so many growth probabilities. Silvopastoral system are a combination of trees, forage, crops, and cattle trying to achieve sustainability from the environmental, social, and economic point of view. We realized there were benefits for the soil, but we also saw changes in the structure and the production scale of these companies or organizations, which are usually family-owned organizations and livestock-based. But this approach also creates positions, improved animal welfare, and today, as we have better beef and better timber, we may achieve competitive advantages in the market. What species did we use? We started with pine trees, Chaeda and Eleutis. After that, we moved to hybrid. We switched from Eleutis to Caribbean, and lately we have been using eucalyptus because it grows really fast. And it is becoming increasingly used in these models. In the delta of the Paraná River, the local people work with poplar, and in our region we also use araucaria, kiwi, and silverberries. The management considers the same practices uses for forestry management, that is pruning and thinning. Through the thinning, we create more distance among the branches, and through pruning, we reduce the number of knots. This improves the quality of the timber and allows light to go through the trees to improve the grasses. We carefully design this layout of the trees. We use paired lines, as you can see here, 2 lines separated by a kind of alley. In the case of pine tree, we use 12 meters. In the case of eucalyptus, 20 meters. So in between, we produce forage for bales. from the economic point of view, there are advantages in the allocation of working capital, which is usually scarce in these companies because we have land, but not too much working capital. So we really appreciate the time and we consider the livestock we have. On this chart, we can see the evolution of the silvopastoral systems in the blue line. We see an increase in the forestry area, and the red line is the animal stocking rate. If the stocking rate doesn't change, upwards or downwards, that means the silvopastoral system is doing well. However, if the forestry area increases and there is a reduction in stocking rate, well, in that case, there has been a change in the use of soil and forestry has taken land from livestock. That taking land from, well, has to be prevented because livestock produces income on a yearly basis. That is, it provides the petty cash so that we can get the money after 12 years when we sell eucalyptus, or 14 years or 18 years when we sell pine tree. The timber we produce, or we will produce less timber in a silvopastoral system than in a forestry system that is 100% forestry, but in the silvopastoral system, the timber will be much better quality because of the pruning and thinning I mentioned earlier on, starting in 2006, and after this paper published by the FAO, made by Stefan et al. The title of this paper was Livestock's Long Shadow. They stress the emissions of methane produced by enteric ruminations. We have 50 million heads, and the heat effect is 28 per unit of methane, and equivalent to carbon dioxide, and we see that the emissions of livestock are much higher than the 15% produced by industry and transportation. But the big difference is here. In the case of livestock, we are only measuring emissions and not carbon uptake. Livestock breeding is part of a carbon cycle, as we can see here. So all carbon emissions, methane emissions, are taken up by an increase of photosynthesis. So this creates a virtuous circuit. It's different from a car when the energy used to move the engine comes from combustion based on oil. These additional effects, or summation effects, are also seen when there is an improperly planned livestock breeding activity. This is an area that was deforested. There is loss of plants, loss of use of fossil energies and fertilizers to improve the land, these grasslands, and eventually the beef production will decrease continuously. This can be changed if we use the silvopastoral system, where cattle breeding has a mitigation strategy. That is, trees grow, they capture CO2, there is an increase, a growth of native forests, there is an increase in the number of heads, so that the emissions per kilogram of live weight come down. There is an increase in organic matter because there's a better management of livestock. Today, with regenerative livestock breeding, we can see these results, and well, less fossil fuels are used, and less fertilizers. Zeni is a company that is working this way, the way I have just described, because through diversification and complementation of two activities, livestock breeding and forestry in the same land, today 30% of the land is used for both purposes. 16% of the service is used for livestock breeding and 40% of the total forestry surface. Here we can see synergies too. There is an improvement in animal welfare, more resistant to frosts, it's a better conservation of water in the prairies or paddocks. This is a carbon positive cattle breeding. We have calculated it through very different methods, and emissions, carbon emissions, are taken up by the trees in a silvopastoral system. This system can be certified by a certification company that would show that this system is carbon positive. This could be done by using all the records we have that show how we manage our farms, our activities. In the province of Corrientes, when considered as a unit, consider it's 5 million 5 million heads of cattle. Talking about the farming acreage, 10% is used for silvopastoral system. Today, the carbon capture makes up for 11% of the emissions of cattle breeding. I would say, by way of conclusion, that silvopastoral systems are productive models that include two activities, produce products with a high market value. They bring about changes in the structure of the companies. They protect biodiversity of plants and animals. And besides, well, they get the positive consequences of the shadow on the grasses. And the shadow is a threat for silvopastoral systems, so they have to be taken into account from the very beginning. And both activities should be carried on hand in hand, and one should not take the other one or remove the other one from that area. And finally, we get timber. This timber should be used in the furniture industry and in the construction industry. This is my email address. Thank you very much for your time, and I am willing to answer any questions you may have.
Buenas tardes.
I'm Javier Jengue. I'm a CONICET researcher and I work in the group of forestry economy in Tandil. In previous presentations, you heard how silvopastoral systems can be a good productive alternative. I will talk about the progress that we made in the country. A silvopastoral system includes the action of different stratas at the different place, and there are ecological relationships that modify the production and growth rate of each stratum. So a specific livestock with a grazing model can improve or decrease the presence of species in the grazeland. In the relationship between grasses and trees, sometimes there is a competence at the beginning, but once the tree is established, there is a kind of competition through shade, through water, and through nutrient uptake. There's also an ecological relationship between trees and the livestock because the trees offer improvement of the environment and animals also graze, forage around the trees, and so there is a sort of opposition. But this relation change as the relationship changes as the trees grow. Here we have a eucalyptus plantations. To the right, you see that grasses have disappeared because of the competition with trees. In this case, the forestry management will be very important in order to keep these mixed systems. the competition and facilitation at the different stages depending on the environment gradient that we are having. And it was proven that drier environments increase the facilitation process, and in the wetter environments, there's more competition. So these relationships change depending on the environment. I also want to show you some examples of application of silvopastoral systems at the national level. Here we see the forestation in Córdoba. Here you have shrubs and you also have trees. We have the I just wanted to summarize showing you this image. There was higher stocking rate, livestock stocking rate for each of the systems, depending on the trees. The grassland had a higher gross protein percentage compared to the check, but um, animals can use a better fraction of the forage. In the Pampas region, different trials were conducted. Here we have the result. This caused a change in the composition of the grassland from C4 species to C3 species, and there is a change when winter finishes. It is different in summer and in winter. In summer, in this case, the presence of the tree is much more favorable. Going back to Cordoba, this is a partial result of the thesis. This is the rolling pampas in Argentina. Trees are not homogeneously distributed in the land. They are planted in strips. This is information because this provides information across the whole productive cycle. In this graph, we see the forage production of the silvopastoral system compared to the open pit or the open production. During 14 years, trees were very big, there was too much shade, and so this caused a lower production of forage compared to the open production system. In time, this facilitation process at the beginning was quite expanded, and finally, at the end of this system, competition started. This graph shows us that uh, the same system, but it shows how the production of forage was accumulated with time. Much more forage was accumulated, the combined system of silvopastoral system accumulated more forage than the open system. The presence of trees creates more stable environments, especially regarding the temperature spread range. In winter, the temperature of the soil was different because it was under the trees. In summer, there was an atmospheric demand, and is in the Patagonia, but in the Pampas region in winter, the temperature of the soil had lower stress indexes below the trees, and in summer the heat stress there was heat stress under the trees. There were also changes in the behavior of animals depending where they were standing, they were at rest, or they were grazing. So we see that the environment causes change in the resource dynamics. These resources are related with the quality and quantity of sunlight, with the temperature and or moisture, relative temperature and moisture in the air, and also water, salts, and nutrients. There will be changes in the species in the gracelands. We are going to have to see changes in the productivity. We will have a different reaction to threshing. Also, there will be a different use fraction, and also there will be changes in the forage qualities. Not always the forage that grows under the trees is better than the one that grows in the open production system. So we need a system that allows us to produce enough wood and of enough quality for the industry. And also we need to preserve the duration of the grassland. All these tools are very important to mitigate the greenhouse gas effects. The fixing of carbon in the soil is important. It is important to point out that forestry systems contribute to the uptake of carbon in the soil, but much more than grasslands. We know that growth rates, the individual growth rates in silvopastoral systems is better than those in more thick vegetation. Apart from carbon, we have other two gases, the nitrous oxide and the methane gas. The generation of nitrate is higher in trees, and we have to add to this the nitrogen fertilization. This has been discussed at the national level. In Aapresid, presentations have been made on this because the management of the forest causes different effects on the water systems. And this also causes movement of salts and relocations may take place. Therefore, species selection in forestry management is key, not only for water distribution, but also for salt distribution. And finally, the oxidation of methane gas in soils is very important. We know that forestry operations have bacteria that oxidize the methane, but this capacity will depend on the species, the type of soil, and the forest management. In some cases, we see that the methane oxidation capacity in these type of soils is much higher than those of crops, because this is stressed by the presence of trees. I wanted to point out that there are several relationships between the production systems. We need to be optimum in production. Therefore, we need to collect knowledge through different disciplines. We need a team of competent people that interact. There are national silvopastoral congresses where a lot of information is provided. You are all invited, you are all welcome to participate in these congresses. The information that has been published in these 4 congresses has been published in the web.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Ana.
Good afternoon. I am Ana Maria Lupi. I work at the Science Institute at INTA Castellar. I am the final speaker in this panel, and I will talk about the potential benefits of silvopastoral systems in Argentina. Today, it's clear that one of the main threats we face is climate change and extreme climate events. This is the result of the growth of CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, so much so that today scientists are warning us that if the trend continues as it is moving up today, we would reach a turning point or a critical point when several processes would be compromised or endangered. Rather, this tells us we should find out another way of producing, and poses the challenge of developing production models that are not only profitable but should also decrease environmental impact, their environmental impact. This is where silvopastoral systems play a role. Silvopastoral systems are considered systems that are intelligent from a climate point of view, because having trees and livestock together brings about advantages from the profitability and environmental point of view. Trees or forests are a strategic tool to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and to fix uh, that carbon within their structures, that is in the wood or in the timber and in the soil. One of the issues I would like to talk about is the adaptability of these environments, their versatility to be implemented in different environments with different species. So I'm going to invite you to tour different regions of Argentina, where we will be able to see how the systems have been introduced and adjusted by using quickly growing species or native species. We can see this example in the province of Misiones, where we have pine trees in Corrientes, as one of the speakers has already shown to you, in the Paraná River Delta, in Entre Rios and Buenos Aires, with willows and poplar trees, in Neuquén, the Patagonia, with pine trees. So these environments are the environments where we find most of the silvopastoral systems in Argentina. However, we firmly believe that there are other regions in the country that have a huge potential for these systems to be implemented in lands that are not good for agriculture or for farming, and that could become lands for cattle breeding. So these silvopastoral systems would be set up in areas where, in acreages that don't compete with agriculture. This would increase the versatility of the production systems in regions such as the northwest of Argentina or the Chaco region. Silvopastoral systems have also been set up, but using species such as algarrobo, that is very adaptable to soils that have faced salinization issues. So in this area, trees are helping to recover the soil. Besides, through cattle breeding, you get additional income. Using or growing trees by agricultural companies creates new sources of income and gives us the chance to produce other goods and products which were not considered in the pampas in the past. Today, we might think of a tree that could help us produce biomass for energy, construction structures for pharmaceutical companies, for the food industry, and goods that were unthinkable in the past. For example, biomaterials, textiles, and even the manufacturing of sports shoes using eucalyptus timber as a raw material. All this is based on innovation and involves added value. In summary, I would like to stress some elements that are an opportunity within the silvopastoral systems, the combination of the components, trees, forage, and animals get us synergy that increases production, and it also improves our marketing strategy for beef in a global market, which is asking for a different way of production. This is a production model whose global profitability is larger than the individual models by themselves. This is a productive model that may be set up in many different lands, where other uses are not possible, and we have many kilometers of such lands. Argentina has or should set up a framework to foster forestry activities, for example, with non-reimbursable funds, so that farmers or producers could set up forest or forestry entrepreneurships, because in these kinds of organizations you get your income in the very long term. Besides, by producing timber, we will be able to meet the demands of the domestic market, where there is a demand for an unmet demand for many products in the wood timber industry, in the furniture industry. We also have a housing shortage, and of course the timber products could be used in biomaterials and other areas. Thank you very much for your attention. I invite you to jump the fence and think of a new production model where the times may be different from the times we are usually managing or considering. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a los cuatro por la disertación.
Thank you very much to the four speakers for your presentations. We have learned a lot about this subject matter in a very short time, and there are many questions. I will choose some of them. I will start with some general questions, and after that I will have some specific questions for some of the speakers. The first question would be, why do you think that despite the competitive advantages of having diverse systems, why are very few farmers or producers taking up this approach? Well, despite all the benefits and advantages, the economic benefits, environmental benefits, and animal welfare benefits, the main problem related to the uptake of silvopastoral systems is the financial one. These are activities which call for long-term investments. If good funding systems would appear, these silvopastoral systems would expand a lot. This actually happened in the end of the 90s, when the subsidies, the non-reimbursable funds expanded. These systems began to evolve, the silvopastoral systems, and these companies are getting good results today. I believe not too many people tackle this approach. Some of them because they don't know about it, and most of them because they don't have the necessary funds for it. I don't believe these systems are not making progress. In Corrientes, as Jorge was said, there are 50,000 hectares with this approach, which is a lot for something which only started 20 years ago. I believe that funding is very important. I believe we have a very good tool, that is the green insurance policies, and I hope the governments take it up. If you don't know what it is, well, I will tell you what it is. It's a part of it's a tax paid on car insurances that amount would be used to fund these forestry plantations. You mentioned the non-refundable funds. Where should producers go to get them? I believe Martin and Jorge are best suited to answer this question, but these funds should be asked should be requested at the Ministry of Industry and Forestry. Several documents have to be submitted, several forms have to be filled in, and some funds are given to pay for one part of the total investment to be made when planting trees, and that amount is paid after 2 or 3 years. So the technicians from the ministry go and visit the plantation, and when they find that the trees are there and they are growing, well, the money is released. I have a question, or I have something to say about the previous question, if I may. In regions outside the traditional forestry regions, so in the Pampas, for example, I believe that there is a cultural component here. I'm saying this because we see this on our everyday work. When we talk to farmers, we get the feeling that it's hard for them to think of a production process that may take 10, 12, or 15 years to reap results. So, besides the lack of communication of this, I believe there is also a cultural issue. This is a question for Javier.
Uh, cons- eh, Considering that some provinces are putting in place legislation as in Córdoba, how do you think that this would impact on the water balance or water consumption? If forestry legislation, if people say that trees are a pump for water consumption. They use more water than grasslands. What happens is that sometimes this happens in the worst places in the field where you have limitations, turf, or some other characteristics in the soil that are not favorable, so trees need to use a lot of water. This does not mean that it cannot be viable. The thing is that we see how we can improve this in a productive environment. Sometimes we believe that if you put trees in a place where the water table is come up, it's not a good thing because this would be the area where water will be captured. So you need to occupy places where the water use would be more efficient. You cannot say absolutely that trees productions, food production in a specific part of the field will be effective. You cannot tell. One more questions you can ask questions. How the trading system of wood, of timber in general, and with this certification of carbon positive lifestyles, what is the benefit for marketing? I mean, for entering a market. Regarding the first part of the questions regarding timber trading, there's a lot to be improved regarding quality. Those who work with pump and crops, you know that you can have a corn with different grades. This does not happen in wood. We have 2 or 3 markets. One is in wood for sawmills. The other is wood that can be used to make chips, and the other one is the woods to generate thermal energy that then becomes electricity. What is the positive impact for a company to have the carbon positive certifications? We believe that in the post-pandemics world, even before, but these products that have an environmental added value will have a will be better accepted. They will be more eligible. Before starting these presentations, I received by WhatsApp that Marce, the Brazilian group, is launching into the market the first beef, the first meat with neutral carbon certification or stamp. It's not about selling more. It's about continue to sell in many cases. So we are on time. There are many specific and technical questions related to the tree species type of capturing a profitability, but we are running out of time. So please get in touch with the speaker. To close this, I think that it's very clear how these uh, plenary meeting started. We need to look for more synergies and do this correctly. There are many alternatives. There are lots of alternatives that we are considering in the Congress. A part of this Congress is to provide this information. You have all been very clear. Lots of questions will come to you because I have almost 15 questions that I couldn't answer. So I'm at your disposal for any joint work you would like to do. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Gracias.